I've played a lot of Mario Party, maybe a little too much, but the game just has so much potential. You can so easily adjust the rules or add handicaps to completely change how the game is played. Because of this, I've done a ton of different challenges in the game, but honestly, lately I've been kind of bored. I've been in search of a new challenge, something different, so I made a decision. I wanted to be the best in the world at Mario Party. Now, although I have a lot of experience with Mario Party, I don't really have any experience with speedrunning, so I would need to start small. I jumped on speedrun.com and had a look at what categories I could compete in, but to my surprise, Mario Party Superstars only has 2 speedrunning categories. There's all boards, which is just winning every board in the fastest time possible, and then there's all minigames, which, you guessed it, you have to win every minigame. If I'm being completely honest, these 2 categories sounded pretty boring. I wanted something a bit more fun, something with a bit of character. So I did what any content creator would do, and decided I'd just make my own Mario Party speedrun. I made a list of possible speedruns I could do, but there was one in particular that really stood out to me, and that was getting 3 skeleton keys in the shortest time possible. The idea of it sounded so stupid, but also so entertaining. The skeleton key is often considered the most useless item in the game, and really only serves one purpose. It just opens gates, that's it. This is great when you actually need to open a gate, but honestly, that's not very often. So why would you ever need 3 of them? Exactly. So it was decided. I was going to be the fastest person in the world to get 3 skeleton keys in a single match of Mario Party. And boy was I excited. But what I didn't realize is that the next 4 days would be an emotional roller coaster. Now, because I made this speedrun up myself without really putting any thought into it, I didn't actually have any idea how I was going to get 3 skeleton keys as quickly as possible. What I did know is that there was 3 main ways to get items. The first and most obvious way is the item shop. Practically every item shop in the game sells a skeleton key, and at only 3 coins each, it's a wonder how Toad is even still in business. The second way is to land on an item space, which will trigger an exciting item minigame. There's 5 item minigames in total, and the minigame is chosen completely randomly, which is great when you're trying to do a speedrun. The first minigame is roll out the barrels. This is what we would call a top tier minigame for speedrunning, because unless there's something seriously wrong with you, you should have no trouble keeping track of your desired item as it rolls and bounces around inside its barrel. Then, once it stops moving, it's just a matter of going up to it and smashing it open like some sort of superhuman. The next minigame is Hammer Slammer. This minigame takes a bit more skill because you have to know how much you should raise your hammer to get the correct item. But nothing you can't learn with a bit of practice, right? Wrong! Isn't it awesome that Mario Party Superstars doesn't let you play item minigames outside of adventure mode, but lets you play literally every other possible minigame? I know! You can add swinging with sharks to that category too, because instead of raising your hammer, you're raising your body. Want to know the perfect time to release yourself so that you can get any item with ease? Me too! And while we're talking about skill, can you even consider bombing balloons a skill-based minigame? Because I would love to know how the hell you're supposed to figure out the timing for this one. And don't even get me started on Winner's Wheel. Ho 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 ho! More like Loser's Wheel, because everyone's a loser if they think they're really going to get an item that they actually want. Anyway, then the last way to get items is by landing on a lucky space. Now, if you thought Winner's Wheel had bad odds, wait till you see this. When you land on this space, a roulette appears that has a random amount of options which have, you guessed it, random prizes. Now, it should be said that what position you're in has the biggest known effect on what those prizes are, and it should also be said that for the purposes of the speedrun, Skeleton Key is actually a pretty standard option as one of the prizes. However, I can confidently say that where the roulette stops after you press the A button is very inconsistent. Yay! So with all this information, it's clear that the item shop is the most reliable way to get skeleton keys. Item space is probably the second best option. Of course, what item minigame you get is kind of important, but at least you have a little bit of control over what item you get. Not like that lucky space. Surely with such an unreliable outcome, we wouldn't even consider putting this in our speedrun route, right? Speaking of which, with all this in mind, we had to make our most important decision. What board was going to be the best to play on? Yoshi's Tropical Island, and some other board not worth mentioning, didn't even have gates, meaning no skeleton keys. So that left Spaceland, Woody Woods, and Horrorland. I knew Spaceland had a lot of item spaces, but it only had one item shop, and it was located halfway around the board. On the other hand, both Woody Woods and Horrorland had 3 item shops, and both boards have an item shop right at the beginning, which was a huge advantage. Now up until this point, my plan had been to get 3 skeleton keys in 3 turns, meaning 1 key each turn. But when I started to look carefully at the Woody Woods map, I noticed something. If you landed on this item space and got a skeleton key, you could then, in theory, roll a 7 on the second turn, which would get you past the item shop for a second key and onto the lucky space for a potential 3rd key in only 2 turns. This was huge, but it was obviously going to require a lot of luck, and of course a lot of patience, something I was already very familiar with. After a bit more planning, my strategy was this. On turn 1, my ideal roll was a 1 or a 10, which would put me onto the item space for a good chance at my first key. I could also roll a 4 or an 8 and try my luck with the lucky space. Then on turn 2, depending where I was, I could land on this lucky space or on one of these 2 spaces for my final key. So that was it. All that was left now was to start doing attempts. Now for those that might be unfamiliar with Mario Party Superstars or resetting turns, I'll give you a quick rundown. To start with, the most important thing is that you're the player that rolls first, which means you need to win the dice roll that decides the turn order. If you don't win, you'll have to exit out and start another match. Now this alone can take a bit of time, depending on how lucky you are, but it's the only real setup you have to do for this speedrun. Once you win this dice roll, the game will save before the first turn begins. This is important because once the turn starts, if you don't get the roll you need, you can quit to the menu and continue from your save. I'll show it here one time so you can see the process for resetting, something I was going to be doing a lot. The same goes for if I fail an item minigame or a lucky space. I could reset and start the turn again. I also need to mention that the game will save again at the end of each turn, so if we failed on turn 2, we would have to delete the save for this match and do the setup all over again. This is going to be important later on. Because I somewhat value my sanity, I decided that the timer would start from when I press the dice block option. If I reset the turn, the timer would reset. On that note, I also decided the timer would end as soon as 3 skeleton keys were displayed next to my character portrait. And now, finally, after all this, it was time for my first attempt. But I didn't get the roll I needed. A sign of things to come? Luckily, on our first turn, we had 4 spaces that we could land on, meaning a 40% chance of success. So it wasn't long until we got our first good roll, and you will not believe what happened next. Yeah, I mean, you didn't really think we'd get one on our first try, did you? But only a few attempts later, this happened.
Finish.
Wow, you guys are really gonna keep falling for that, huh? Not long after, we had another failed attempt, but then finally on our 4th successful roll and only our 8th roll in total, we got our first skeleton key. Then at the end of the turn, we got super lucky with one of the shortest minigames. Yay, time save. Now remember, we needed to roll a 7 to continue and land on the lucky space. But unfortunately, we get a 4, and all of a sudden, our first proper run was over. Now up until this point, I thought things were going pretty well, and I was pretty optimistic, but somehow during my planning, I had overlooked something very important. Remember earlier when I said the game saves after each turn? For some reason, in my mind, I thought when I reloaded the save, I would be back at turn 1, ready to start more attempts. Don't ask why I had thought this, I mean, it was a long day, guys, okay? Anyway, this oversight affected my original strategy quite a lot. You see, it was easy for me to make it past turn 1. I had high odds of landing on an appropriate space and getting a key on the first turn, but my odds on the second turn were much lower. Not only did I have to roll a very specific number, but I also had to get very lucky with the lucky space. Failing on turn 2 meant a much bigger setback than failing on turn 1, and I knew I'd be failing on turn 2 a lot. This would mean I'd have to restart the whole match over and over until I won the dice roll that decided the turn order. This was a problem. Back to the drawing board I went. Ideally, I'd want to be landing on an item space on turn 2 instead of a lucky space, since I had a better chance of getting a key that way. That basically only left me with one option. Roll an 8 on turn 1 to land on the lucky space, then if successful in obtaining a key, I had to roll a 9 on turn 2 to make it to the item space. I could also roll a 10 in hopes of getting another key from the second lucky space. That meant 1 in 5 odds for turn 2 just to have a chance, and only 1 in 10 odds on turn 1. I was going to be putting a lot of faith into the inconsistent lucky space, but keeping in mind it was favourable to reset on turn 1, this was going to be my best long-term option. So with this new strategy in mind, I redid the setup and started making attempts again, waiting to roll an 8. And waiting, and waiting, and then, I mean, you can see where this is going. Yeah, still waiting. For some reason it took forever to roll my first 8, but finally after 15 minutes I got it. And unsurprisingly, we missed the skeleton key on the lucky space. Immediately on the next attempt though, we roll another 8, but again, we fail on the lucky space. Then for some reason, we once again get super unlucky and reset 34 times until we get our next 8. Except this time, we get an item bag. For those that don't know, an item bag will keep giving you random items until you can't hold any more, which in this case is 2 items. The item bag is considered a fairly good item and is normally quite rare, but because we bought the skeleton key, we were now in 4th place, and as mentioned earlier, being in last place gives us more favourable options on the lucky space. Because of its rarity, and because the items it gives are totally random, I hadn't factored the item bag into my strategy. But as you will see later on, it plays a pretty big part in this speedrun. Like I said, the item bag never crossed my mind and I was about to reset the run out of habit, but then I thought to myself, what if? Lo and behold, the first item we got was a skeleton key, which was a huge boost of adrenaline. The second item we got was just a warp block. Useless. Or was it? Once again, I had my mind so set on my strategy that I didn't consider other options, but this warp block was certainly a missed opportunity that I'll talk about later on. We continue playing, and this time we get Bowser's Big Blast, which is probably one of the longest minigames and a huge time loss. But honestly, I was just happy to finally make it to turn 2 again, and this time with better odds. Then once the minigame is finally over, we roll a 10. Not the 9 we wanted, but still a chance to get a skeleton key from the lucky space. Could we really get 2 skeleton keys from 2 lucky spaces and get a world record on the first day? No. But it was pretty damn close. By this point, I've been doing attempts for well over an hour. It's late, and with our new strategy, we've barely had any good attempts, so I decide to end day 1. Starting off day 2, everything is in motion. We've planned out our route, made the necessary tweaks, and we can focus on attempts. We have a slow start, taking over 10 minutes to roll our first 8. And we get a chomp call. A few attempts later, we quickly get another 8 and another chomp call. We do attempt after attempt, getting the odd 8 here and there, but never a skeleton key. Then finally, after what seemed like an eternity, we get our first non-item bag lucky space skeleton key. And after all that, you'll never guess what happens next. Or maybe, you probably will, it's kind of obvious. But if you didn't guess, we don't even get the right roll on turn 2. Now at this stage, some of you might be thinking, why not just leave the timer going, reset turn 2, and carry on from there? Because I'm not a little That's why. After this, it takes some time to set up again. The dice is definitely not on my side today. Or at least that's what I thought. After we finally win the dice roll, we start to get a lot luckier. Well, with rolling 8s anyway. They should call these unlucky spaces because we seem to be getting everything except a damn skeleton key. Now, like I said earlier, I'm a patient man. One would have to be to attempt something like this, but after a while, 3 hours, of being a failure, it starts to take its toll. I'm realizing now that I had underestimated the difficulty of getting a simple skeleton key from a lucky space. And that wasn't even the worst part. If I did finally get a key, then I had to hope I got a good roll on turn 2, and then hope I got an item minigame that I could actually win. What had I got myself into? After another failed attempt, I'm ready to give up for the day. But something tells me to wait until I roll one more 8. You can't win the lotto if you don't have a ticket, baby. And the next 8 is my ticket. I just know it. So I keep trying, roll after roll. And then I get it. Another 8. Optimism is at an all-time high. The roulette starts spinning. This is it. No, it's not. That's not it. Another chomp call. I'm done. I'm going to bed. I'll be honest, this was the first day I was not very enthusiastic about the Let's Get Freaky speedrun. I knew the RNG would be bad, but I didn't expect it to be this bad. After hours of attempts in the last 2 days, I'd got to turn 2 3 times, and one of those times was with the old strategy that didn't even really count. With no idea how long this might take, I was beginning to think I could give up before I even completed my first run. But regardless, I push on. Not because I wanted to, but because I had spent most of the week on this video idea and I really needed to upload something. Surprisingly, we roll an 8 on our very first attempt of the day. Was this the RNG gods throwing me a lifeline? Thanks, RNG gods. Actually, I take it back. We fail on the lucky space and then take forever to roll another 8. This time though, we get an item bag, but unfortunately, there's no skeleton key inside. Very sad. But then the very next roll, we get another 8 and we get a skeleton key. So many emotions. Now this time things are a little different because something else happens that I had once again not considered. You see, our good friend Crazy Daisy rolls a 10 and lands on the event space. Who cares, you ask? Well, on this board, there's these signs that tell you what way to go, because they just do. And these signs change direction every turn. Not a problem, since I had planned around this and knew what way they'd be facing on turn 2. But the event space changes their direction, meaning next turn the sign would be facing right. Oh no! Luckily for me, I happen to have a picture of every map saved on my computer. Please don't make fun of me, it's so I can plan my videos, okay? While the rest of turn 1 plays out, I quickly open up the map to plan my next move. In a panic, I spot an item space 7 spaces away, and with this in mind, I go back to the match just as the minigame is beginning. The minigame ends, and I pray once again to the RNG gods that I get a 7. So close. I quit the match and reflect on what had just happened. Upon closer inspection, I realize that there's actually 2 item spaces I could have landed on, rolling a 7 or a 10. Also, I noticed that there's 2 lucky spaces 5 and 9 spaces away. It turns out that the CPU landing on the event space is actually optimal, adding yet another layer to the RNG onion. Would this new discovery have an impact on our future attempts? It really didn't. I just thought it was an interesting piece of information. After all this, I have mixed emotions. I'm feeling more optimistic knowing that if the CPU gets an event space, my odds double, but I'm also feeling upset that I just missed a 2 in 5 chance. But I carry on, knowing that if I don't pull this off in the next couple of days, I'll be making a video about how much of a failure I am. The newly found optimism doesn't last long, because after that good attempt, we start getting incredibly unlucky with the dice. It's taking over 10 minutes between rolling 8s, and the lucky spaces are once again not lucky. This carries on for most of the day, but I'm determined to get one more good run before I call it quits. So when this happened, my heart started racing. Now you may remember a while back when I got the same item combo a couple of days ago, but for some reason took no notice of the warp block. Well, this time was different. I was desperate and running out of ideas, and when I saw the warp block, a light bulb went off in my head. What if I warp backwards with one of the CPUs and pass the item shop a second time, picking up a 3rd skeleton key? It was genius, but relied heavily on the CPUs getting low rolls. So Luigi rolls a 9, but Daisy and Mario are actually within range. Daisy is 10 spaces away, but Mario is only 5 spaces away. If I could swap with Mario, a world record was almost guaranteed. When I get this hole-in-one in Chip Shot Challenge, I know it's a sign. It feels like everything is coming together, and then against all odds, we actually warp with Mario. At this point, my heart is racing, and I'm practically already celebrating. So when I rolled this, my whole world came crashing down. I couldn't believe it. I was sure that this was the run. I got so close. It felt like this was the best chance I was ever gonna get. All I had to do was roll a 5 or higher, but once again I had fallen short. Naturally, after this I closed the game, unwilling to make any further attempts for the day, or maybe ever. I'd had a lot of time to think about what had happened. Yesterday was tough, but I wasn't ready to give up just yet. Any attempt could be the one. So I picked myself up and got back to it, because I ain't no quitter. Surprisingly, on our very first attempt, we get an item bag. But my excitement is short-lived when I get a mushroom and a cursed dice block. However, this looks familiar. I checked the previous day's footage, and there it is. An item bag with a mushroom and a cursed dice block. A coincidence? Keeping in mind I had ignored the warp block the first time I got it, I checked back to that very first item bag from day 1. A skeleton key and a warp block, just like yesterday. Did this mean the item bag would always have one of these 2 combos? I wasn't certain, but this was enough to spark the fire inside of me. Maybe I could get another warp block opportunity. My focus was no longer on the skeleton key from the lucky space, but instead the item bag. And luck was on our side today because we're rolling 8 after 8 after 8. I'm starting to get some momentum. In less than 20 minutes we get 9 8s. A stark contrast to the last couple of days when it took almost 20 minutes just to get 1. I'm in the zone, and although I'm not getting any skeleton keys, I feel better and better with each attempt. At one point we roll 3 8s in a row. Still no skeleton key, but I know it's coming. I'm so sure of it. However, what I wasn't expecting was this. We get not 1, but 2 skeleton keys from the item bag. Honestly, I didn't even know this was possible. Once the animation finishes, the timer stops at 37.57 seconds, a time beyond my wildest dreams. A few days ago, I was wondering how to get 3 skeleton keys in 3 turns. Now, I had just gotten 3 keys in 1 turn, and what a ride it had been. Thanks so much for watching, and remember to subscribe.